I'd like to find out whether Ginvile Ramanauskaite is on the line with us. Ginvile, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Are
Can
you
you hear
joining
me?
us from Vilnius?
Yes,
That's
yes.
good. Okay. How are things in Lithuania these days? Are you all in a lockdown and working from home, or?
Um, Not really, like the whole Lithuania is not in a lockdown, but ourselves, we implemented some of the safety measures and splitting the teams. So actually, our main company office is in Kaunas,
All right.
but we have a small office in Vilnius, so we are just a couple of people working from here.
All right. Okay, Ginville, you're representing the company BitDegree, and your key expertise is in startup marketing. So I would guess that a lot of startuppers who are listening to us are very much looking forward to what you have to say. Just in reference to timing, I think if you heard the previous presentation, I think it worked very well. That the presentation was approximately 20 minutes, and then we have 5 minutes to question and answers. I think it worked quite well the previous time. I think it will work this time as well. Okay, Ginville, the
Uh,
floor is yours, please.
in the next 20 or maybe 17 minutes, I will try to give a bit of a light and put a light on BitDegree and BitDegree's experience and perspectives, insights into working with academia on building a startup that is science-based, scientific insights-based, and maybe this answer to this question posted on the slide will become a bit more clear in those 15 minutes. I want to start with one thing and one observation I have from the startup space in Lithuania, but I believe the same applies for the Baltics. Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania are pretty homogeneous countries. So the number of startups is growing. And let's say looking at the communication from universities and general knowledge, of course, those startups are not that big and there are no clear communication of how they started or what are the affiliations. But there are startups coming from university space. And I listed a number of those I know from Lithuania. Of course, I excluded those that are, let's say, more standard internet businesses, e-commerce, game design, etc. Because I would say that I would attribute those more to entrepreneurship skills and promotion of that rather than science itself. So when we look at science-based startups from universities, we clearly see mostly STEM disciplines reflected. In Lithuania, we have, of course, a lot of lasers, optics, space research. The engineering, disciplines result in more hardware, 3D startups. There is, of course, growing number of deep algorithms, AI startups, and surely medtech, health tech companies, which are natural. And I think that's what we relate a lot when we think about science and startups. You cannot build a medicine related startup without a scientific knowledge behind. But for me, the question comes is this fundamental science only relevant in the hard fields? What about more humanitarian disciplines, social innovation? Isn't it relevant? Because from what I see, there are not so many startups that would have this the scientific element in them. And I would say that this question didn't come to my mind when I joined BitDegree, or BitDegree was not even started with this idea in mind, because BitDegree was founded by internet entrepreneurs coming from web hosting industry, who saw simply a niche as it is standard in a startup space. And they saw that their free web hosting service, used by 29 million users globally, is primarily used for, by people to learn, to apply this basic knowledge they have in computer science and building their projects. So it felt to the founders that there is no space in the internet where that would be appealing enough for people to learn digital skills. And that's how BitDegree was born, believing that if we think technology first and we have this startup mindset, we can build an efficient education platform. So BitDegree is essentially an online education platform focused on teaching professional digital skills. So we are talking about adult learning here. It is community driven. So if you would turn on bitdegree.org, you would first see the marketplace, meaning that anyone in the world, any expert could upload and monetize or share for free their content. And anyone in the world can come, learn, and purchase those courses. We are gamifying the learning experience. And of course, one of the key elements was blockchain. We do have a couple of blockchain applications built in the platform. A bit less than 3 years into operations, we have around 1 million users, 1.7 million course enrolls, a significant global traffic. The whole approach of BitDegree and the vision and why we have built it was to build an efficient, decentralized education ecosystems where educators, learners, and employers would interact in an efficient manner. Because if employers are enabled to signal about the skills needed, educators would be inclined to create that content. Learners are learning something that is relevant and then goes into employment market. Our bets building this BitDegree and yet another online education platform was that, of course, learning should be fun for adults as it is for kids. Games are played by people of all ages, so why not to make education more attractive and fun? The second is that in this decentralized system, of course, we need to align incentives, and those incentives could be economic, actually, cash or crypto, or that's where the blockchain comes in, or something similar. So we had always this idea of paying people to learn. As cheesy as it sounds, it actually can have a strong and feasible economic background. And then education and employment markets shouldn't be separate. Education should feed into employment and market. So why it is so separated right now? So these are the 3 bets that we started working on and believing, yay, we will rock the world, we will change this, how education is done. And we did build a quite cool system platform. We gamified it, choosing this cyberpunk theme, made it pretty attractive. It's a new platform, so of course, in terms of designs, I would say it's state-of-the-art. And yet, we face the same issue of low completion rates. Most of the MOOCs or the MOOCs revolution started in 2011, 2012, promising revolution in global education. And yet, of course, the education became more accessible, nothing has really changed fundamentally. Good courses from Harvard, Stanford University, you name it, face the same low completion rates, averaging 2 to 5% mostly. And even though more and more people are engaging into online education, the averages are shrinking because I believe those early adopters are just blended in a bigger mass. So we do face the same actually problem with all what we have done with the gamification. Not necessarily everything is implemented perfectly, but with all what we have done, we also face this. And for me, it sounds like a more fundamental problem to solve. We are dealing here with two things, learner motivation, and how do we deal with it? How do we deal even with differently working attention in online space? And then, of course, courses and the format in which courses are presented to the learner. And when you have this fundamental problem, I think there are a couple of ways how you can go about it and how you can solve it. So I listed 4 options that I see, and from the easiest to the most complex. And of course, the first 2 are the most used in startup world. So of course, you could make your best guess. You could look for best practices, check what your competitors are doing, what we are calling with friends, steal with pride, the best ideas, talk with experts, maybe go into literature review and see what scientists are saying. The other option is A/B testing. Of course, you can check and test some hypotheses on the platform, sending users to different groups and seeing the results. But still, these are more suitable for small interventions like communication message, design, color of a button, placement, etc. It is still hard to do a really full-scale experience A/B testing, or at least with limited resources and, of course, limited people working in that particular area. Because, of course, again, it's a lot of knowledge needed. Then you could refer to some frameworks and some logic. And we actually did work with world-known gamification consultants, the Octalysis group, applying their developed Octalysis framework that you can see on the slide when building the gamification and the whole learning experience on the platform. So we understood early on that we cannot just put a badge, a leaderboard, just randomly do other gamification tactics. It should be a whole experience, and to create that, we needed some framework to start with. So this is what we did. And then, of course, scientific research could be an option when you can shape your own questions, find scientific support and more methodological approach to how you analyze the literature and you running your own experiments. So these are the options. And with problem like how to make people learn, I think it was not avoidable to skip the last part and go into scientific research. And that's why in 2019, the beginning of the year, we started a project, R&D project, together with Vilnius University, Faculty of Economics and Business Administration, to research learners' motivation to study online. going more into details how incentives, economic and not necessarily economic, works, what effects gamification could have, a bit of social environment and its impact on the learner motivation, on completion rates, learning achievement. We funded this project through European funds, and this is something to keep in mind, that these programs are available. It's just, I think, not so common for startups to engage into those. And it takes quite some knowledge and time to develop these kind of projects. But I will come back to this a bit later. So basically, we are now in the last stage of the project with Vilnius University. We ran multiple experiments, and here are some insights we got and how we implemented those into the platform. So talking about economic incentives, we see that it can motivate users to start learning, but it's not necessarily the factor that will lead to finishing a course. Linking courses with job opportunities is way stronger incentive than any economic one. So of course it is more this extrinsic motivation that cash or other economic incentives are not really working for in long term when learning. But then still we analyze the different levels, and we see that low to medium incentives are the optimal. So what do we do with these insights? We use those now in designing pilots and projects with employers, and also within the platform. How do we use these extrinsic motivators like incentives in the learning process? We also analyze different gamification elements and experiences. The tricky part, again, as I mentioned, is that gamification should be treated as a whole, so not separate. It cannot give very much information on separate tactics or methods. But what we have seen is that gamification works better for younger audiences than those older ones. And then also gamification works better for people with less learning skills in comparison to, let's say, university students, which is because we ran experiment with Vilnius University students and our global audience. Gamification improves experience indirectly. It's not directly linked to completion rates, but it works on emotion, and that also could help in the learning. And of course, different methods have different magnitude. And we use these in, again, designing some of the flows and user experiences within the platform. And finally, some insights from the community research. We didn't see a very positive effect, but also concluded that this could be related to the stage at which these, tactics or suggestions or forums are introduced, because it also depends on user journey and how invested they are in the platform as such. So looking back at the whole experience of almost 2 years, I would say that partnering with universities and the scientists can be everything. And you need to keep in mind that there will be good things, there will be bad things, and it all depends on you, how you can improve it. So the good thing is, of course, that you get this comprehensive approach towards question at hand. You have maybe some hands to work on the more difficult topics that you would not necessarily have in your daily operations. And then you could also have some new approaches, new methods, scientific methods applied to your case. The bad part is that still comparing to the startup speed, these processes are relatively slow. Some insights are interesting, but hard to implement in the platform, or how to implement it. Just, some insignificant difference, of course, can be ignored, but even some significant ones between groups are hard to implement, and you are not sure whether, okay, is this really valid for me? And sometimes it feels that A/B testing could give more robust answers to your questions. I still believe that it's worth working with academia and answering those questions. You just need to be very open to the learning experience and be involved in educating researchers on what is the context, what problems, what possibilities there are with the technology you are building, because also the inertia coming from scientific world is still present. So you need to also educate a bit about this, all the data you have and possibilities you can do. Overall, the bottlenecks of more startup academia partnerships, and this I would suggest taking into consideration for the government, for universities, for startups, and all the involved people, involved groups, is that, of course, startups are more focused on commercialization, and R&D can be sometimes distracting. There are still very strong stereotypes from startups towards science and towards social sciences by the public, and this needs to be dealt with. Financing schemes are pretty complex. There are a lot of administrative work, and not so many startups would have experience in it. So again, then you just don't consider working with academia. And then, of course, lack of strong relationships, because if you are separated from university, you are coming from somewhere outside, you might not even know what science, what projects university researchers are interested in, what topics, whom to contact, etc. So all this transparency and clarity in communication should be considered. As BitDegree, we still believe in science. We believe that education startups cannot be built without science. And we started actually another project just recently with Tartu University Institute of Education Technology, where we will be building an open learner model and trying to foster self-regulated mechanisms in our platform. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope I didn't rush too much through some of the topics, but just keep in mind, BitDegree is really open about new projects, cooperations, and if you have something in mind, don't hesitate to contact us.